Hi, my name is Stephen Bassford, and I did my project on the confessions. This criminal case occurred in Norfolk, Virginia in 1997, where four Navy sailors were convicted and charged with the murder and rape of a woman named Michelle Moore Bosco. A fifth man, Omar Ballard, was convicted for the murder and rape of Michelle Moore Bosco as well, although this occurred later on. The names of the four Navy sailors were Daniel Williams, Derek Tice, Joseph Dick Jr., and Eric Wilson. In July of 1997, William Bosco came home to find that his wife had been beaten and murdered inside of their home. A family friend, Tamika Taylor, was led to the possibility that Williams had been the one to commit the crime. After 11 hours of interrogation with Detective Maureen Evans and Robert Glenn Ford, Williams gave a confession that did not match the autopsy of Michelle Moore Bosco. Williams also failed the polygraph test, and his DNA did not match the DNA found at the crime scene, which was what made him a key suspect. Others. After determining that there were more than one person involved in the crime, police were led to Joseph Dick Jr., as he was a known associate of Williams. Dick also failed the polygraph test, and his DNA also did not match the DNA found at the crime scene. Derek Tice and Eric Wilson were later convicted of being part of a crime, although their DNA did not match what was found at the crime scene either. All of these men convicted at the crime scene stated that Robert Glenn Ford has threatened them with the death penalty or death if they did not confess to the crime. This led to all of the men confessing in order to save their own lives. Each of their confessions was different from the others' confessions, and each said that they were coerced into confessing by fearing for their lives. Multiple other men are charged and eventually released because of lack of evidence. There were roughly 8 people. Eventually, Delvey Stover hands police a letter sent to her daughter that indicated Omar Ballard as the man who murdered and raped Michelle, and Omar Ballard was also charged with raping Delvey Stover's daughter, who was 14 at the time, within the same month as Michelle. Ballard had been introduced to the Bosco family by Tamika Taylor. Ballard's DNA was confirmed to be the DNA found at the crime scene, and Ballard also claimed that he was the only person at the crime scene when Michelle was raped and murdered. This led to the 4 original men convicted of the crime to become known as the Norfolk Four. All were kept in prison despite Ballard's confession of being the only person responsible for the crime. This was done in order to hide the extortion and coercion committed by Robert Glenn Ford. All of these men stayed in prison, although there have been attempts to have their sentences overturned and then released. Derek Tice was released, and then his release was overturned by a higher court. Eric Wilson served all 8 years of his rape sentence. Ballard said that the justice system would not allow him to say that he acted alone, and instead gave him a deal in response to him saying the original 4 were also involved. Ballard later talked about this publicly, said he acted alone, and believes the 4 original men confessed out of fear for their lives. In conclusion, the 3 remaining in prison were all granted conditional pardons, but were branded as felons and sex offenders. They also have to register as sex offenders every year, and currently all live with their parents. Eric Wilson was released 4 years prior to the release of the others and said it's been extremely difficult and hard to live with his life, although he has eventually met someone and remarried. Detective Ford was eventually found guilty on 2 of 4 extortion charges and 1 charge of lying to the FBI. This occurred a few years ago. It wasn't around the same time as the actual trial. On February 25th, 2011, Ford was then sentenced to 12.5 years in prison by the U.S. District Judge Jerome B. Friedman. And that's the confessions.